Sterling Oaks Country Club is a place where polished manners often hide the cruelest intentions, and where a $3,000 suit can drape over a man with a 10-cent character. I'm Ruby Green, the director of membership. Today, my parents walked through these heavy oak doors dripping in gold, begging to join my circle. But as they spoke of family legacy, I could only smell the diesel fumes of the moving van from the day they abandoned me in a trailer park 15 years ago because I wasn't refined enough. They think they are here to impress a stranger, but they are about to face the daughter they tried to erase. Scritch, scratch, thud. There is a specific sound a fountain pen makes on 300-pound cotton bond paper. It is a dry, scratching whisper. It sounds like money. It sounds like finality. And the rubber stamp that follows, that is the sound of judgment. My name is Ruby Green, though most people here at Sterling Oaks Country Club simply call me Madame Director. I sit in a corner office that smells of lemon oil, old leather, and silence. Outside my window, the lawns are cut to the exact height of a putting green. The white oaks standing guard along the driveway are over 100 years old. Everything here breathes order. Everything here whispers legacy. My job is simple, at least on paper. I am the director of membership and protocol. I am the gatekeeper. Every year, dozens of the city's wealthiest families apply to join our circle. They bring their bank statements. They bring letters of recommendation from senators and CEOs. They wear Italian suits and drive German cars. They think admission is about the numbers in their portfolio. They are wrong. I am the one who looks them in the eye. I am the one who watches how they treat the valet who parks their car. I watch how they speak to the waitress who pours their iced tea. My grandmother taught me a lesson that I have carried with me every day of my life. Class isn't about the price of the suit, it's about how you treat the tailor. I have an eye for fakes. I can spot a counterfeit soul from across a crowded room. The board trusts me implicitly because I never let the wrong sort of people in. They think I have a natural instinct for high society, if they only knew where I came from. My assistant, a quiet girl named Sarah, knocked on my heavy oak door. She placed a chilled glass of water on my desk. "The landscaping crew is trimming the hedges under your window, Director," she said softly. "I can ask them to stop if the noise is bothering you." "It's fine, Sarah, thank you." She left, closing the door with a soft click. I spun my leather chair toward the window. Down below, a heavy truck was idling. A cloud of thick gray exhaust drifted up toward the glass. The smell hit me instantly. Burnt diesel, dust, heat. It didn't smell like the country club. It smelled like betrayal. In a split second, the mahogany walls of my office dissolved. I wasn't 29 years old anymore. I was 14. The air was hot and sticky heavy with the scent of pine needles and gasoline. I was standing on the cracked pavement of the Sunnyside trailer park. The heat was radiating off the metal siding of my grandmother's single-wide trailer. I can still hear the cicadas screaming in the trees. I can still feel the grit of the gravel through the thin soles of my sneakers. My father, Robert, was checking his watch. He was leaning against a brand-new silver luxury sedan. It shone like a spaceship in the middle of our dirt driveway. He had sold his patent 3 days ago. The money had hit the account that morning. We were rich. Or rather, they were rich. The moving van was already packed. It was full of the things they wanted to keep. The good furniture, the photo albums where everybody was smiling. I stood there with my small duffel bag waiting for them to unlock the trunk. I was wearing my best dress. It was a blue floral print from the discount store. I thought I looked nice. My mother, Cynthia, stepped out of the car. She was wearing new jewelry, a gold necklace that was too thick and diamond earrings that caught the sun so brightly it hurt to look at them. She didn't look at me. She looked over my shoulder at the trailer with a sneer of disgust. "Robert, we're burning daylight," she said. Her voice was high and tight. "Mom," I took a step forward. Is there room for my box of books? I can hold it on my lap. My mother finally looked at me. She sighed. It was the kind of sigh you make when you drop a grocery bag, annoyed, burdened. She walked over and placed her hands on my shoulders. Her palms were sweaty. Ruby, she said, we've talked about this. Talked about what? My stomach dropped. It felt like I had swallowed a stone. Your father and we have a new life now. A big life. In the gated community. She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like knives. She failed. You're a sweet girl, Ruby, but look at you. You're rustic. Rustic, I whispered. You have the trailer park in your voice, honey. She said, her smile straining. You don't know which fork to use. You don't know how to speak to important people. You would only be miserable trying to keep up with our new friends. You'd be embarrassed. We'd be embarrassed for you. I can learn, I pleaded. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it away to smooth her silk skirt. Grandma needs you more, my father called out from the driver's seat. He didn't even turn his head. She's getting old. Someone needs to watch her. We're doing a good thing, Ruby. We're giving you a job. A job. I felt the tears hot and stinging in my eyes. I'm your daughter. And we will send a check every month, my mother said, opening the car door. Think of it as a fresh start, for all of us. She got in. The door slammed. That sound, the heavy, expensive thump of a luxury car door sealing shut, echoed in my ears louder than a gunshot. The engine purred to life. They didn't wave. They didn't look back. They just drove. I stood in the dust watching the silver car disappear around the bend. The diesel fumes from the moving van choked me. The dust settled on my blue floral dress. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. My grandmother Evelyn. She leaned on her cane, her knuckles white. Let them go, baby, she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. Trash takes itself out. They left me, I sobbed. They're ashamed of me. Then we will make them regret the day they drove away, Grandma said. She turned me around to face the trailer. Come inside. I'm going to teach you how to be a lady. Not the kind that buys class, but the kind that builds it. The smell of diesel faded. The hum of the air conditioner returned. I blinked, staring at the manicured lawn below. My hands were trembling just a little. I clasped them together, forcing the memory back into the dark box where I kept it. I am not that girl in the dust anymore. I am the director. Sarah knocked again. Director, she called out. I have the priority file for the 2:00 interview. The committee needs your preliminary stamp before they meet the candidates. Bring it in, I said. My voice was steady, perfect. She placed a thick manila folder on my desk. It's a rush application, Sarah noted. Husband and wife. They're applying for the Platinum Legacy membership. Apparently, they need access to the club's peer-to-peer lending syndicate. Rumor is their manufacturing business is in trouble. They need a loan fast or they lose everything. I nodded, pulling the file toward me. Let's see if they meet our standards. I opened the folder. The photos were clipped to the top right corner. They were older now. The faces were sagging slightly, the hair was dyed a little too dark, but the eyes were the same. Applicant Robert Green. Co-applicant Cynthia Green. My heart hammered against my ribs, a slow, heavy drum. They didn't know. When I started here, I legally changed my last name to my grandmother's maiden name. To the world, I was just Ms. Vance. To them, I was a ghost. A rustic memory they had paid for and discarded 15 years ago. They were coming here to my kingdom to beg for money, and they had no idea that the girl they left in the dust was the one holding the stamp. If you believe that no child should ever be treated like a burden by the people supposed to love them, please hit the like button to show your support for Ruby today. The file on my desk felt heavier than paper and ink should. It felt like a ticking bomb. I stood up and walked to the window. The blinds were angled just enough that I could see out, but no one could see in. It was a trick I learned from my predecessor. In this business, he used to say observation is more valuable than conversation. Below me, the circular driveway of Sterling Oaks was bathed in afternoon sunlight. The gravel was raked into perfect concentric circles. It was peaceful. Then I heard the engine. It wasn't the polite hum of the members' electric sedans or the vintage growl of a collector's Jaguar. It was aggressive. A large obsidian black luxury SUV crunched onto the gravel, taking the turn too fast. It scattered the stones that the groundskeepers had spent all morning smoothing. I leaned closer to the glass. The car stopped at the porte-cochere. It was polished to a mirror shine, but I noticed the license plate frame immediately. Prestige Leasing of Miami. They didn't own the car. They were renting the lifestyle. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Robert Greene. My father. He was heavier than I remembered. His suit was a shade of blue that was just a little too bright for a Tuesday afternoon, and his gold watch caught the sun violently. He didn't look like a man at ease. He looked like a man holding his breath. Our head valet, a polite young college student named Thomas, stepped forward to open the passenger door. "Welcome to Sterling Oaks, sir," Thomas said. I could hear his voice faintly through the glass. Robert ignored him. He walked around the front of the car, snapping his fingers. "Snap, snap!" "Boy!" Robert barked. "Watch the rims on this. I don't want a single scratch." "You hear me?" "Of course, sir," Thomas said, lowering his head. "I mean it," Robert said, pointing a thick finger at the boy's chest. "This vehicle costs more than your tuition. Park it in the front. I want it visible." My stomach tightened. It was the same tone he used to use on the mechanics at the trailer park. Arrogant, loud, and deeply insecure. The passenger door opened and Cynthia stepped out. My mother looked brittle. That was the only word for it. She was thin, dressed in a cream-colored suit that cost a fortune, but she wore it like armor. Her hair was dyed a blonde that was too yellow, sprayed into a helmet that wouldn't move in a hurricane. She was clutching a designer handbag like it contained the nuclear codes. She didn't look at the beautiful oak trees. She didn't look at the architecture. She looked at her shoes. "Robert, the dust," she complained, her voice carrying up to my window. "This walkway is filthy. I told you I shouldn't have worn the suede heels." "Just get inside, Cynthia," Robert muttered, adjusting his tie nervously. "We have 10 minutes." I watched them bicker as they walked toward the heavy double doors. They were terrified. I went back to my desk and opened their financial disclosure form again. I needed to understand the stakes before I walked into that room. The numbers told a tragic story. On the surface, they looked wealthy. They listed assets of $4 million. But the liabilities column was bleeding red ink. They had 3 mortgages on the mansion. The manufacturing plant, the one Robert had bought with his patent money, was leveraged to the hilt. They had maxed out 4 lines of credit. Then I looked at the purpose of membership section. They weren't joining for the golf. They weren't joining for the social galas. They had checked the box for the syndicate. The syndicate was a private investment group within the club, wealthy members lending to other members. It was discreet, handshake lending. The application showed they were seeking a bridge loan of $3 million to modernize equipment. But I knew better. I looked at the dates on their debts. They didn't need equipment. They needed liquidity. They were drowning, and they needed $3 million to keep their heads above water for another year. They were buying a $200,000 membership they couldn't afford just to get a loan they probably couldn't repay. It was a house of cards. And they had walked right into my wind tunnel. I closed the file. I could have rejected them right then. I could have stamped the paper and had security escort them off the property. It would have been easy. But I needed to know something first. I needed to know if 15 years had changed their hearts or just their bank accounts. I stood up and took off my navy blue director's blazer. I hung it on the back of my door. Underneath, I wore a simple white silk blouse and a charcoal skirt. Without the jacket, without the name tag, and without the authority of the director. I looked younger, smaller. I walked to the mirror. I took off my heavy black framed glasses and set them on the desk. I loosened my hair just a fraction. I didn't look like the director of protocol anymore. I looked like help. I pressed the intercom. Sarah. Yes, director. I'm going to take the water service into the blue room myself. Hold my calls for 20 minutes. Understood. I picked up the silver serving tray. On it sat a crystal pitcher of ice water and 3 glasses. The ice clinked softly against the glass. It was a comforting sound, cold and sharp. I took a deep breath. I wasn't Ruby the director. I was just a girl with a tray. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the marble. The blue room was our most formal waiting area. It was designed to intimidate with high ceilings, velvet drapes, and portraits of dead founders staring down from the walls. I paused at the door. I could hear them whispering inside. Told you to wear the navy tie, Cynthia was hissing. The red is too aggressive. We need to look humble, Robert. Humble, but capable. Stop picking at me, Robert snapped. I know how to close a deal. I built a company, didn't I? You bought a company, she corrected him. And now we have to save it. If we don't get this membership, the bank calls the note in August. We lose the house, Robert. I am not going back to an apartment. I won't do it. Shh, someone's coming. I pushed the door open. They were sitting on the velvet sofa, sitting stiffly apart. When I entered, they both straightened up, putting on their masks. Robert puffed out his chest. Cynthia smoothed her skirt and forced a tight, polite smile. I kept my head down. I kept my posture, submissive, shoulders hunched slightly forward. I didn't make eye contact. Water for you? I asked softly. Please. Robert said, his voice booming, a little too loud for the small room. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the water. I placed a coaster in front of him and poured. My hand was steady. Then I moved to Cynthia. I placed the coaster down. As I tipped the pitcher, I let my wrist twist just a fraction of an inch. It was calculated. A single heavy drop of ice water missed the glass. It landed with a wet plait right on the leather of her expensive beige handbag sitting on the table. Cynthia gasped as if I had thrown acid on her. Oh! She snatched the bag away, wiping it frantically with her hand. You clumsy girl! Look what you've done. I am so sorry, ma'am, I whispered, keeping my head bowed. I grabbed a linen napkin from the tray and tried to help. Don't touch it, she snapped, slapping my hand away. Her nails were sharp. This is Italian leather. Water stains it instantly. Good Lord, is it so hard to pour water? I apologize, I said, backing away. Robert sighed, shaking his head. I hope the actual committee is more competent than the help. We're dealing with serious business here. They didn't recognize me. I was standing 3 feet away from the woman who gave birth to me. I had my father's nose. I had my mother's chin, but they didn't see me. They saw a uniform. They saw a function. They saw a clumsy waitress who had threatened their precious accessory. It was the ultimate insult. I wasn't even worth remembering. I clutched the tray to my chest like a shield. I needed to ask the question, the one that would seal their fate. I can bring you a towel, I stammered, playing the part. We get a lot of members visiting family here. It's a nice place for reunions. I paused, looking up through my lashes. Are you folks from around here? Do you have family in the area? Maybe children nearby? The room went quiet for a heartbeat. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly. Cynthia was still dabbing at her purse. She stopped. She looked at Robert. Robert looked at the wall. It was a chance to acknowledge me. A chance to say, yes, we have a daughter. We haven't seen her in years and we regret it every day. Cynthia laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Oh, no, she said, waving her hand dismissively. We don't have any family here. We are essentially unattached. Unattached, I repeated. Childless, actually, Robert added firmly. He took a sip of his water. Just the two of us, always has been. Makes it easier to focus on our legacy, you know. Less baggage. Sad story, Cynthia added, putting on a tragic face. But we've moved on. We have our business. That's our baby. I felt the blood drain from my face. I felt cold, colder than the ice water in the pitcher. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had erased me. To the world I didn't exist. I was baggage they had lost at the airport 15 years ago. I see, I said. My voice was different now. The submissive tremolo was gone. It was harder. It must be very lonely, to have all that money and no one to share it with. Cynthia narrowed her eyes. She sensed the shift in tone. She looked at me, really, looked at me for the first time. Excuse me, she said, offended. That's a bit impertinent, isn't it? I'll go get the director, I said, turning sharply on my heel. She'll be very interested to hear about your legacy. Wait, Robert called out. Make sure you tell her we're ready, and bring a dry towel for this bag. I didn't answer. I walked out of the blue room and closed the door. I leaned against the wall in the hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon oil and old money. They wanted to meet the director. I walked back to my office. I put the tray down. I picked up my heavy black glasses and slid them onto my face. I put my navy blazer back on and buttoned it. I smoothed my hair. I looked in the mirror. The frightened girl was gone. The director was back. I picked up the red stamp. Sarah, I said into the intercom, send them to the boardroom. I'm ready. Have you ever dealt with relatives who only care about money or status? Don't be shy to share your story in the comments. We read every single one. The boardroom at Sterling Oaks is designed to make people feel small. The table is 20 feet of solid mahogany. The walls are lined with oil portraits of men who built railroads and steel mills. The windows are high and arched, letting in columns of light that illuminate dust motes dancing in the air. I sat at the head of the table. I didn't face the door. I turned my high-backed leather chair toward the window, watching a hawk circle the golf course. I wanted them to see the back of the chair first. I wanted them to feel the weight of the authority before they saw the face of their daughter. The heavy double doors creaked open. Mr. and Mrs. Green, Sarah's voice announced. The director is ready for you. I heard their footsteps. Robert's heavy, confident stride, Cynthia's quick, clicking heels. They moved like people who own the place, even though they were minutes away from bankruptcy. Thank you, miss, Robert said, his voice dripping with false charm. Wonderful facility you have here. Truly world-class. They pulled out the heavy chairs at the opposite end of the table. I heard the fabric rustle as they sat. Director, Robert spoke up. I'm Robert Green. This is my wife, Cynthia. We're delighted to finally meet you. I apologize for the incident with your kitchen staff earlier. Nerves, you understand. I didn't turn around. Not yet. Mr. Green, I said. My voice was low, controlled. I have reviewed your application for the Platinum Legacy status. Excellent, Robert said. I could hear the smile in his voice. Then you see, we are the perfect fit. We are self-made people. We believe in tradition. We believe in family values. We want to leave a mark on this community. A mark? I repeated. Interesting choice of words. Yes, Cynthia chimed in. We believe that wealth is a responsibility. We want to mentor the next generation. Show them the right path. The irony was so thick it nearly choked me. They wanted to mentor the next generation. They had abandoned their own generation in a trailer park with $50 and a pat on the head. Your financial statement, I said to the window, indicates you are seeking access to the syndicate. You are looking for a bridge loan. $3 million. A formality, Robert said quickly. Too quickly. Just a little liquidity for expansion. Our assets are tied up in long-term instruments. Your assets are leveraged to 90%, Robert. You are drowning. The silence in the room changed. It went from polite to confused. Excuse me. Robert's tone sharpened. That is highly sensitive information. I expect a certain level of discretion from this board. Now, if you would be so kind as to turn around, I prefer to do business face to face. As you wish. I planted my feet. I gripped the armrests, and I spun the chair. I was wearing the glasses. I was wearing the blazer. I sat perfectly straight, my hands clasped on the red file folder. I watched their faces. It happened in slow motion. Robert squinted. He looked annoyed, expecting a stranger. Then he looked confused. He recognized the shape of my face, the set of my jaw. Cynthia froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She gripped her pearls. You, Robert stammered. He pointed a finger, then dropped it. You're the waitress, from the waiting room. I am the director of membership, Robert. I always like to inspect the candidates personally. He stared. He looked at my eyes, and then the floor dropped out from under him. Ruby, he whispered. Hello, Father. Hello, Mother. The word hung in the air like smoke. Cynthia let out a strangled noise. Ruby, but how you're here. I work here, Cynthia. I run this club. This is impossible, Robert said. He stood up, his face flushing red. You're a secretary. You can't be the director. This is a joke. Sit down, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the absolute authority of a judge passing a sentence. Robert sat. This is... He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Then a look of desperate calculation crossed his face. He forced a smile. It was grotesque. Well, he said, letting out a nervous laugh. Well, this is wonderful. Cynthia, look, it's Ruby. Our Ruby. She's done well for herself. Robert, Cynthia whispered, terrified. No, this is good. Robert leaned over the table, his eyes wide and manic. Ruby, honey, this simplifies everything. We're family. You know the situation. You know we're good for the money. Just stamp the paper. We can catch up later. Maybe dinner. We owe you a dinner. You owe me a childhood, I said. The smile vanished from his face. Now, Ruby, he said, his voice hardening into the bullying tone I remembered so well. Don't be dramatic. That was a long time ago. We did what we had to do. We were building a future. You were building a facade, I corrected him. And now it's crumbling. I opened the heavy leather-bound book of bylaws. The sound of the pages turning was loud in the quiet room. Section 4, Paragraph C. I read aloud. Membership shall be denied to any applicant who demonstrates a gross lack of moral decorum, deceit in their application, or a failure of familial duty. I looked up. You checked the box marked no children. You claimed you were childless. Cynthia stammered. We meant no dependent children. It's just a form. Ruby, it's paperwork. It is fraud, I said. But that isn't why I'm rejecting you. Rejecting us? Robert stood up again. He slammed his hand on the mahogany. You can't reject us. We are your parents. We gave you life. You gave me a complex, I shot back. And then you gave me away because I didn't match your upholstery. We did it for you. Cynthia cried out. The tears were flowing now, but I couldn't tell if they were real or just another tactic. You were miserable with us, Ruby. You were a country girl. You loved your grandmother. We wanted you to be happy. Happy? I stood up. I was trembling just slightly, but I channeled it into steel. I was 14 years old, Cynthia. I wasn't rustic. I was a child. Do you know what it felt like to watch your taillights disappear? Do you know I waited by the road for 3 days because I thought you were coming back? I thought it was a mistake. We sent money, Robert shouted. Checks every month. I didn't want your money, I yelled my voice, finally cracking the professional veneer. I wanted my father. I wanted my mother. I took a breath. I composed myself. I adjusted my glasses. But you were right about one thing, I said softly. Grandma needed me, and I needed her. She taught me things you never could. Like what? Robert sneered. How to live in a tin can. She taught me that dignity is keeping your word, I said. She taught me that you don't step on people to get taller, and she taught me how to spot a bad investment. I looked down at their application. You are a bad investment, Robert. You have no liquidity, you have no honor, and you have no place at Sterling Oaks. You listen to me, Robert growled. He walked around the table, coming toward me. He was trying to use his size to intimidate me. If you don't approve this loan, we lose everything. The house, the cars, the status. We will be on the street. Is that what you want? You want to see your own parents homeless? You won't be homeless, I said calmly. Grandma still has the trailer. The couch pulls out. I will not live in a trailer, Cynthia shrieked. I am a lady. A lady, I said, knows when to leave a room where she isn't welcome. I picked up the heavy rubber stamp. The handle was worn smooth by years of use. It felt righteous in my hand. Ruby, don't, Robert begged. He stopped moving. He saw the look in my eyes. Please, we're family. Yes, I said. We are. I brought the stamp down. Thud. The red ink bled into the paper. Denied. No, Robert whispered. He slumped against the table, the fight draining out of him. You're ruining us, Cynthia sobbed into her hands. You're cruel. You're just cruel. No, I said, closing the file. I'm protecting the club. And unlike you, I don't throw family away entirely. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. Sarah, yes, director. Send her in. The red ink on the paper seemed to pulse in the afternoon light. Denied. The word was upside down to them, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a 6-letter wall built between them and their salvation. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. It pressed against the windows. It smothered the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Robert didn't yell. The fight had drained out of him the moment the rubber hit the paper. He looked at the stamp. Then he looked at his hands. They were shaking. Not a little tremble, but a violent, uncontrollable shake. You don't understand, he whispered. His voice was cracked dry as dust. The loan, the syndicate. It was the only thing left. The lines of credit are frozen, Ruby. The house is collateral. The factory is collateral. He looked up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and wet. We don't just lose the membership, he said. By Friday, we lose the keys to the front door. We lose the cars. We lose us. Cynthia let out a high, thin sound. It was the sound of a balloon slowly losing air. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the empty air, seeing her social standing evaporate. Where will we go? She murmured. The crushing shame of it. Everyone will know. The Petersons. The Wrights. They'll all know. You should have thought of that, I said quietly. Before you spent 15 years buying things you couldn't afford to impress people who don't care about you. I sat back in my chair. The leather creaked. But you're wrong about one thing, Robert, I said. You didn't lose us. You lost us the day you drove away from the trailer park. Today you just lost the props. The heavy double doors behind them groaned. Robert jumped. Cynthia spun around, clutching her pearls. They were expecting security. They were expecting to be escorted out by a guard in a blazer. They weren't expecting the sound that came next. Tap, tap, tap. It was the rhythmic hollow sound of a wooden cane hitting the hardwood floor. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. A figure stepped out of the shadows of the hallway and into the column of sunlight. She was small. She had shrunk in the last few years, her spine curving like a willow branch in the wind. She wore a simple Sunday suit, pressed navy blue wool-white gloves, and a hat with a small modest flower. Her shoes were sensible black and polished to a shine. She didn't look like she belonged in a boardroom. She looked like she belonged in a church pew, but she held her head high. "Mom," Robert whispered. The word fell out of his mouth like a stone. My grandmother Evelyn didn't stop walking until she stood right between their chairs. She looked at Robert, then she looked at Cynthia. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her hand. She just looked at them with eyes that had seen 80 years of hardship and joy, eyes that could spot a lie from a mile away. "Hello, Bobby," she said softly. She used his childhood name, the one he had tried to bury under expensive suits and titles. "Mom, what? What are you doing here?" Robert stammered. He looked terrified. He looked like a boy who had broken a window and was waiting for the switch. "I'm here because my granddaughter invited me," Evelyn said. Her voice was scratchy like an old record, but clear. "She told me she had a difficult decision to make today. She asked for my counsel." Cynthia started to cry again, louder this time. She reached out a hand toward Evelyn's sleeve. "Oh, Evelyn, thank God, please. Tell her she can't do this to us. We're family." Evelyn pulled her arm back. She didn't do it violently. She just moved out of reach as if Cynthia were contagious. "Family." Evelyn repeated the word. She tasted it, rolled it around in her mouth, and spat it out. 15 years, Cynthia. I have lived in that trailer for 15 years. I raised this girl on my own. I taught her to read. I taught her to pray. I taught her how to iron a shirt so it looked like new. Evelyn leaned forward, resting both hands on her cane. "Do you know how many times the phone rang in 15 years? The room was deadly silent. 0. Evelyn answered herself. Not on Christmas, not on birthdays, not when Ruby graduated high school valedictorian, not when she put herself through college waiting tables. "We were busy," Robert protested, though the excuse sounded weak even to his own ears. "We were building a legacy, Mom. We did it for the family name." "Legacy." Evelyn laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Bobby, look at you. You're sitting in a borrowed suit, begging your daughter for money you haven't earned to pay for a house you don't own." She lifted her cane and pointed it at the window at the sprawling green lawns of the club. "You think this is class?" she asked. "You think because the grass is cut short and the cars are shiny that makes you quality people?" She shook her head slowly. "A poor man shares his bread because he knows what hunger feels like," she said. "A rich man builds a wall because he's afraid someone will ask for a crumb. You built a wall, Bobby. You built it so high you couldn't see us anymore. Robert's mouth opened and closed. "I wanted to be someone. I didn't want to be trash anymore." "We were never trash," Evelyn said sharply. Her eyes flashed with sudden fire. "We were poor. There is a difference. Poverty is an empty wallet. Trash is an empty heart. You filled your wallet, Bobby, but you emptied your heart to do it." She turned to me. A soft smile touched her lips. It was the first warmth in the room. "You did the right thing, Ruby," she said. "You protected this place. If you let them in, they would have poisoned the water. They don't know the first thing about dignity." Robert slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. The reality was settling in. The bumpkin mother he was ashamed of was standing tall, and he was the one on his knees. Cynthia looked from me to Evelyn, and finally the mask broke completely. The snobbery, the pretense, the high society accent, it all cracked. "We're broke," she whispered, her voice trembling with genuine fear. Evelyn, we're broke. We have nothing. They're going to take the house on Tuesday. Evelyn looked at her. She didn't look down with hate. She looked down with pity. Then it's a good thing, Evelyn said, that Ruby is a better person than you are. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. It was a harsh sound that made everyone look at me. I picked up the red folder, the one containing their rejected application, and I dropped it into the wastebasket. Then I opened my desk drawer. I pulled out a different document. It was bound in blue paper. It wasn't a club document. It was a private contract drafted by my personal attorney that morning. I walked around the long mahogany table. My heels clicked on the wood. I stopped next to my father. "Lift your head, Robert," I said. He looked up. He looked old. "You can't join the club," I told him. "You don't have the character for it. And frankly, you'd embarrass me." I placed the blue document in front of him. "But Grandma is right. Poverty isn't the same as being trash, and I won't let my parents be homeless no matter how much they might deserve it." I uncapped my fountain pen, the expensive one, the one that smelled like success. "Read it," I said. I bet they didn't see that coming, the grandmother being the true voice of authority in the boardroom. Let me know in the comments if you guessed that Evelyn would be the one to deliver the final verdict. Robert staring at the document. His eyes scanned the lines of text moving back and forth with a frantic energy. He was looking for the trap. He was looking for the interest rate that would bleed him dry or the clause that would take his company away. But he didn't find it. "This," he looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "This is a personal loan from the Vance Family Trust." "That is my trust," I said, capping my pen with a soft click. "The money Grandma saved, the money I earned, the money I invested while you were leasing cars you couldn't afford." Cynthia leaned in, reading over his shoulder. Her eyes widened. "It covers the mortgage arrears," she breathed, "and the bridge loan for the factory. It covers everything." "Not everything," I corrected her. "It covers your debts. It does not cover your country club fees. It does not cover your first-class travel. It does not cover new Italian handbags." I walked back to my chair and sat down. I didn't spin it this time. I faced them head on. "This money buys you stability, Robert. It keeps the roof over your head. It keeps your employees paid. But the party is over. You are going to have to live within your means. You are going to have to work." Robert looked at the check attached to the back of the contract. His hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from shock. He looked at me, searching for the anger he thought should be there. "Why," he asked, "after what we did, after what we said to you? Oh, why would you do this? You held the stamp. You could have crushed us." I looked at my grandmother. She was standing by the window watching the sun dip lower over the golf course. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Because I am not you," I said simply. "You taught me that success is measured by who you can exclude, who you can look down on. But I learned a different lesson." I leaned forward. "I learned that true wealth isn't about having enough money to build a wall. It's about having enough strength to build a table." Robert lowered his head. A single tear, heavy and real, dropped onto the blue paper. "However," I added, my voice sharpening just a fraction, "there is a condition, a non-negotiable clause." Cynthia looked up, nervous again. "Interest. We can pay interest once the factory is back up." "I don't want your money," I said. "Look at Clause 7. Robert turned the page. He squinted at the bottom paragraph. "The borrowers agree to a mandatory weekly consultation." He paused, confused. "To be held every Sunday at 1:00 p.m. at the residence of Evelyn Vance." He looked up. "Consultation? Sunday dinner." Evelyn spoke up from the window. Her voice was firm. pot roast, carrots, and you will be on time. If you are 5 minutes late or if you skip a week because you have a social engagement, Ruby calls the loan, the full amount becomes due immediately. Cynthia blinked. You want us to have dinner in the trailer park? Yes, I said. You're going to sit on the plastic-covered couch. You're going to eat off the chipped plates. And you are going to get to know the woman who raised your daughter. You are going to learn week by week what it means to be a family. I'm not giving you money. I told them, my voice softening. I'm buying you a second chance to be parents. I suggest you don't waste it. The room was quiet. The sun was casting long shadows across the mahogany table. Robert picked up the pen. He didn't hesitate this time. He didn't look for a better offer. He signed his name. The scratch of the pen on the paper was different than before. It wasn't the sound of arrogance. It was the sound of surrender. He slid the paper to Cynthia. She signed it, her hand shaking, leaving a signature that was smaller, humbler than the one on her application. Robert stood up. He smoothed his jacket, but the swagger was gone. He looked at Evelyn, then at me. Sunday, he said softly. 1 to 1 p.m. We'll bring dessert. Store-bought is fine, Evelyn said. Just don't bring anything that costs more than $10. We don't like waste. They turned to leave. They walked to the heavy double doors, not as the Platinum Legacy members they had hoped to be, but as two people who had been given a lifeline they didn't deserve. Robert paused at the door. He looked back at me one last time. Ruby, he said. He struggled with the words. You have your grandmother's eyes. I know, I said. He nodded, and then they were gone. The doors clicked shut. The silence that rushed back into the room wasn't heavy anymore. It was light. It felt like the air after a summer storm. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 15 years. My shoulders dropped. I took off my glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose. Well, Evelyn said, walking over to the table. She poked the rejected club application with her cane. That went better than I expected. I thought for a minute you were going to let security throw them out. I wanted to, I admitted. For a second when he started yelling, I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel small. But you didn't, Grandma said. She reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was paper-thin, warm, and dry. And that is why you are the director and he is just a man in a rented suit. I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I poured 2 cups of tea from the silver service. The china clinked softly, a delicate, civilized sound. I handed a cup to Grandma. We walked to the window together, looking out at the immaculate grounds of Sterling Oaks. The shadows were stretching across the fairway, long and purple. It was beautiful, but it wasn't my whole world anymore. Do you think they'll come? I asked. On Sunday? Evelyn took a sip of her tea. They'll come. They need the money. But eventually, I think they might come because they need us. I nodded, watching a gardener rake the sand trap in the distance. I used to think that revenge would feel like fire. I thought it would be loud and triumphant. I thought it would end with me standing on a mountain and them in the valley. But standing there holding a china cup, listening to my grandmother breathe beside me, I realized that revenge is just another debt. It binds you to the people you hate. It keeps you in the ledger with them. Mercy is the only way to close the account. I turned away from the window, looking directly at you. They thought class was about excluding people who weren't good enough. They thought it was about zip codes and bloodlines. But Grandma taught me the truth in that trailer park amidst the dust and the noise. Real class isn't about how high you can build your walls. Real class is having the absolute power to destroy someone who hurt you, and choosing to help them up instead. That is a luxury that money can't buy, and it is the only legacy worth keeping. Clink. I set the cup down on the saucer. Thank you for spending time with us today. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us tell more stories like this. See you in the next video. What a powerful lesson on the true meaning of class. Have you ever dealt with relatives who put status above family? Don't be shy to share your experience below. Your story might be the inspiration for our future episodes. We read every single comment. We truly appreciate you being here. There are even more captivating stories waiting for you right on your screen. Please click one now so you don't miss the ending. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. This has been a story from Radiance. We'll see you next time.